October 2nd. A man mowing his lawn. A single shot. Dead. Within 24 hours, 4 more people. Different places, different lives. All erased. No pattern, no warning, no escape. For 3 weeks, an entire city held its breath. But that's just the beginning of what happened on this day. Because on this same date, October 2nd, Hitler made a gamble that would doom Nazi Germany. Polish heroes fought their final battle knowing they'd already lost. And a man stepped off a ship carrying an idea so dangerous, the world would never be the same. What connects a sniper's bullet, a desperate winter assault, and a naturalist's notebook? Nothing, except the date, October 2nd, 5 stories, 1 impossible day. And the terrifying thing, most of them, you've never even heard of. Let's begin where fear began. October 2nd, 1836. Falmouth, England. A young man stepped off a ship after 5 years at sea. His name was Charles Darwin. He was 27 years old, and he carried with him notebooks filled with observations that would change everything humanity believed about itself. But let's go back. Why was Darwin on that ship in the first place? In 1831, Darwin was supposed to become a clergyman. That was the plan. Respectable, safe, boring. Then, he received an invitation. HMS Beagle needed a naturalist for a voyage around the world. The mission? Map the coastline of South America. The duration? 2 years. It lasted 5. Darwin sailed to Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and the Galapagos Islands. He collected fossils. He observed animals no European had ever studied. And slowly, a dangerous idea began to form in his mind. On the Galapagos Islands, Darwin noticed something strange. The finches, small birds, had different beaks on different islands. Some had thick beaks for cracking seeds. Others had thin beaks for catching insects. Why? Darwin realized. These birds had adapted to their environments. They weren't created exactly as they were. They had changed over time. But here's what made this idea so explosive. If animals could change, if species weren't fixed, then the biblical story of creation might not be literal truth. Darwin knew this would be heresy. So when he returned to England on October 2nd, 1836, he said nothing. He kept his notes private. He waited. It would take him 23 more years to publish on the origin of species in 1859. And when he did, the world erupted. Religious leaders condemned him. Scientists debated him. The public was shocked. But Darwin had already changed history. The journey that ended on October 2nd, 1836, gave humanity a new origin story. Not divine creation in 7 days, but evolution over millions of years. Charles Darwin stepped off that ship a naturalist. He became the man who redefined what it means to be human. October 2nd, 1944. Warsaw, Poland. The city was burning. Bodies lay in the streets. And after 63 days of desperate fighting, the Warsaw Uprising, one of the most heroic and tragic resistance efforts of World War II, came to an end. Here's what happened. By 1944, Poland had been under Nazi occupation for 5 years. The Germans had murdered millions. The city of Warsaw was a prison. But the Polish resistance, known as the Home Army, refused to give up. They had a plan. The Soviet Red Army was approaching from the east. If the Poles could liberate Warsaw before the Soviets arrived, Poland might remain independent. On August 1st, 1944, 50,000 Polish fighters rose up. They had makeshift weapons, stolen rifles, homemade grenades, even bottles of gasoline. They faced 15,000 German troops with tanks, artillery, and air support. The odds were impossible, but they fought anyway. For 2 months, the battle raged. Polish fighters held neighborhoods. They ambushed German patrols. Civilians built barricades from rubble. Women and children carried ammunition through sewers. The Poles expected Soviet help. They were desperate for it. But Stalin stopped the Red Army outside the city. He waited. Why? Because Stalin wanted the Polish resistance destroyed. If they liberated Warsaw themselves, they'd demand independence. But if the Germans crushed them, Stalin could march in unchallenged. By October, the Poles were out of food, ammunition, and hope. Over 200,000 civilians were dead. The city was rubble. On October 2nd, 1944, the Polish Home Army surrendered. The Germans deported the survivors. Then, on Hitler's orders, they systematically destroyed what remained of Warsaw. Block by block, building by building, 85% of the city was leveled. When the Soviets finally entered Warsaw in January 1945, there was almost nothing left. The Warsaw Uprising failed, but the fighters became legends. They showed the world that even in the face of annihilation, courage endures. October 2nd, 1944. The day heroism met tragedy, and Warsaw became a symbol of resistance that still echoes today. October 2nd, 1967. Washington, D.C. Thurgood Marshall raised his right hand and took the oath of office. With those words, he became the first African-American justice of the United States Supreme Court. It was a moment 300 years in the making. Thurgood Marshall was born in Baltimore in 1908. He grew up in a segregated America, separate schools, separate bathrooms, separate drinking fountains. The law said Black Americans were inferior. Marshall decided to fight that law. He became a lawyer, and not just any lawyer. He became the weapon of the civil rights movement. Marshall argued case after case before the Supreme Court, dismantling segregation piece by piece. His most famous victory? Brown versus Board of Education in 1954. That case ended school segregation. Marshall convinced the court that separate but equal was a lie. He won 29 out of 32 cases before the Supreme Court. 29. In 1967, President Lyndon B. Johnson nominated Marshall to the Supreme Court. It was controversial. Some senators opposed him simply because of his race. But Marshall was confirmed. And on October 2nd, 1967, he stood before the court, not as a lawyer arguing for justice, but as a justice delivering it. Marshall served for 24 years. He championed the rights of the poor, the marginalized, and the oppressed. He fought against the death penalty. He defended free speech, and he never forgot where he came from. When Marshall retired in 1991, he had spent his entire life breaking barriers. October 2nd, 1967, the day America took one step closer to the ideals it claimed to believe in. The day a man who had been told he was less than equal became one of the 9 most powerful judges in the nation. Thurgood Marshall didn't just change the law, he changed what was possible. October 2nd, 1941. The Eastern Front, Soviet Union. Adolf Hitler launched Operation Typhoon, the final desperate assault to capture Moscow and crush the Soviet Union before winter. It was Germany's last chance, and it would decide the fate of World War II. Let's rewind. In June 1941, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union with 3 million men. He called it Operation Barbarossa. The goal? Destroy Stalin's Red Army and conquer Russia in 3 months. At first, it worked. The Germans advanced hundreds of miles. Soviet forces collapsed. By September, German tanks were within sight of Moscow. But then, the weather changed. Autumn rains turned Russian roads into rivers of mud. German trucks and tanks got stuck. Supply lines broke down. The Blitzkrieg, the lightning war, slowed to a crawl. Hitler was furious. Moscow was so close. If Germany could take the Soviet capital before winter, Stalin would fall. The war would be over. So on October 2nd, 1941, Hitler ordered one final push, Operation Typhoon. 2 million German soldiers, 1,000 tanks, 14,000 artillery guns, the largest offensive in history. For the first 2 weeks, it seemed to work. The Germans encircled Soviet armies. They captured hundreds of thousands of prisoners. Moscow was just 100 miles away. But then, something happened that Hitler hadn't planned for. Winter arrived early. In November, temperatures dropped to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. German soldiers, still in summer uniforms, froze to death by the thousands. Tanks wouldn't start. Guns jammed. Horses collapsed. And the Soviets? They were ready. They brought in fresh troops from Siberia, men who knew how to fight in the cold. On December 5th, 1941, the Red Army counterattacked. The Germans were pushed back. Operation Typhoon had failed. Hitler's dream of conquering the Soviet Union died in the snow outside Moscow. From that moment, Germany was on the defensive. The tide of the war had turned. October 2nd, 1941, the day Hitler gambled everything and lost. The beginning of the end for Nazi Germany. October 2nd, 2002. Montgomery County, Maryland. A man was mowing his lawn. A single shot rang out. He collapsed, dead. Within 24 hours, 4 more people were shot. A cab driver, a woman at a gas station, a man vacuuming his car, a woman reading on a bench. No warning, no pattern, no escape. The Beltway sniper attacks had begun, and for 3 weeks, the Washington, D.C. area lived in terror. No one knew who was doing this, or why. The victims were random, different ages, different races, different locations. The only connection? They were all shot by a high-powered rifle from a distance, without warning. Parents wouldn't let their children play outside. People drove in zigzag patterns to avoid being targets. Gas stations put up tarps so customers could hide while filling their tanks. The entire region was paralyzed. Police had no leads. Witnesses saw nothing. The shooter, or shooters, were ghosts, but they kept killing. Over the next 3 weeks, 13 people were shot. 10 of them died. Then, on October 24th, a truck driver at a rest stop noticed something strange. A blue Chevrolet Caprice with 2 men sleeping inside. He called the police. When officers surrounded the car, they found 2 men. John Allen Muhammad, 41, and Lee Boyd Malvo, 17. Inside the car was a rifle with a hole cut in the trunk, a mobile sniper's nest. It was over. The Beltway snipers were caught. Muhammad was executed in 2009. Malvo, who was a minor, received life in prison, but the scars remained. The Beltway sniper attack showed how vulnerable we all are, how a single act of violence can terrorize millions. October 2nd, 2002, the day fear came home, and an entire region learned what it means to live under siege. And there you have it, 5 stories, 1 date. Charles Darwin returned home with an idea that would redefine humanity. Warsaw fell after a battle that proved courage never dies. Thurgood Marshall shattered a barrier that had stood for centuries. Hitler launched an attack that sealed Nazi Germany's fate, and 2 snipers turned a region into a nightmare. October 2nd has seen triumph and tragedy, discovery and defeat, heroes and villains. But here's the thing, history isn't just dates and names, it's the story of us. Every decision, every sacrifice, every moment of bravery or cruelty, it shapes the world we live in today. So, what will your October 2nd be remembered for? If you enjoyed this journey through history, make sure to subscribe to today's History Official and hit that notification bell. We bring you stories like this every week. Events that changed the world, told the way they deserve to be told. And here's a question for you. Which of these 5 events shocked you the most? Darwin's return? The Warsaw Uprising? Thurgood Marshall? Hitler's gamble? Or the Beltway snipers? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. Also, check out the playlist in the description for more deep dives into history's most fascinating moments. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember, history isn't just what happened. It's why we are who we are today.